America. My name is Osei-Frimpong. I come to you when I come to you. And the wife and I went to go see the American Society of Magical Negroes a few nights ago, and it's been getting bad reviews, and I just don't quite understand why. Because it's actually a lovely movie in a lot of ways, and thoughtful and interesting. It's better than American fiction in my estimation. Although I liked American Fiction fine, I especially thought the first third was well done, right until Tracy Ross's character died. And the last bit was pretty good, but the middle I thought was so-so. And the B and C plots fell flat. But I think it's better than Barbie. I think Barbie, for example, punched down in ways, that white women also often punch down and they don't realize they're punching down. They made fun of the Kens for learning how to play guitar and being excited about it. And they made fun of America Ferrera's husband for learning Spanish, which is something we should be applauding people to do. And but they made him the butt of jokes for that. I don't understand. So Barbie had its problems. American Fiction had its problems, and the American Society of Magical Negroes, it had some problems, but I thought it was overall a very lovely movie, and what it did well was actually very hard. What it did well was depict a lovely couple meeting, a lovely couple involving a black guy meeting, and having a relationship. So the plot of the movie, it's been out for a while. If you haven't seen it, go see it. I'm going to spoil it here, but, either you've seen it or you haven't, or you should go see it. But the plot of the movie involves a guy in his late 20s who is an artist, and he finds himself being terrified of interacting with white people because they kind of run things, and when they don't get their way, they are punitive in ways that are not obvious, right? So this is kind of depicted, this is vague anxiety of having to censor himself among the whites, which we have to do because the whites are punitive in ways that are not obvious, depending on who you talk to. Candace Owens just found out that she's not allowed to be anti-Israel in America because of the whites. The Jewish whites, but because of the Zionists and because people are punitive in non-obvious ways. So vulnerable communities have to tiptoe around them, and that's not often depicted with the sensitivity that it should be. Often it's depicted that black people don't have to deal with the whites, and so black people are depicted as somehow having to struggle with other black people and not necessarily directly confront every day being thrown into having to deal with the whites and then conforming themselves to that. Everybody who knows, if you know a 6'4" black guy who's had to deal with the whites, who works in especially the private sector, you probably know a 6'4" black guy who has to stay mute. Has to not take up space, take the bass out of his voice to be relevant. One of the reasons why you find me so provocative that you watch my show when I put it out is because I am a free Negro who speaks clearly about the whites and what it's like to just be an American and not necessarily cater to the white whims, which is why you have to go to www.funkyacademic.com and kick in $5, $15, or $50 every month if you want me to continue speaking the way I speak, because depending on who you talk to, speaking the way I speak makes me downright unemployable. But it's a lovely movie, and so you got this guy who feels nervous, who has to deal with the anxiety of having to make the whites comfortable and what that means. But he finds a job in doing that, in making the whites comfortable by the Society of Magical Negroes, whose entire reason of being is to make the whites feel comfortable, because when they don't feel comfortable, they start breaking things, and that's bad for the world. And we don't want them to genocide people, so we have to make them feel comfortable about their apartheid when they have apartheid. We have to make them feel comfortable about their ill-got gains when they have ill-got gains. We have to feel comfortable about their ways of life. Insofar as if you make them feel uncomfortable about their ways of life, they get punitive, right? So we have a society of black people whose whole job is to make white people kind of calm down when they feel insecure about their ways, their ways of life, even if their ways of life are dubious. Right? And so this actually, I think, is a pretty good social commentary on the bootlicker class or the gatekeeper class of black people whose entire job, which is a good job in America, of making whites feel comfortable. It's an entire job in these United States. It's depending on who you talk to, it's one of the better jobs for black people in America. You could say this is what Candace Owens' job used to be, but now she's married to like the son of a billionaire, so she's got her back. She can say what she wants for whatever that is. But this idea that there's a society of black people whose livelihood and power depends on making white people feel comfortable, and they do it for the survival of other black people and themselves, is actually a nice place to kind of let the satire go, like a nice point of departure. And that this society doesn't have any autonomous urges of their own that might conflict with the whites is part of the kind of conflict in America, right? So people like, well, even white conservatives like black nationalism until it means getting black people, like those public contracts that have been in the white families' family networks for untold generations, right? So you like HBCUs until they actually start out competing primarily white institutions, then you get upset, right? So there's this idea that black success is good as long as it stays in its lane. And this is what Booker T. Washington was promising, the whites 120 years ago, that black people would stay in their lane until the whites were comfortable with us through our own merit. And that would be fine. But what if black people don't want to stay in their lane? What if they want what you think is yours? What if they want freedom to have a crush on the girl who's your crush? Even if that makes you feel some sort of way. Should they forego it? What does that mean? And so that was kind of a theme that was exposed or kind of addressed in the movie, because the main protagonist had a crush on Lizzie, his superior at work, and Lizzie had a crush on him. But there was another guy, a white guy, who also had a crush on Lizzie, and our protagonist's job as a magical Negro was to keep the white guy happy, so he was going to kind of back off Lizzie and just kind of let it go. But Lizzie had her own career aspirations, and those kind of figured in, and it was really just kind of a lovely movie because Lizzie was portrayed as lovely. Like, she was a career woman who wasn't kind of a nakedly ambitious one, just like a thoughtful one who wanted justice in her life and wanted, love. And she didn't even want love. She didn't even want the career. She just wanted to be good. And she was kind of good at both. And it was just a really lovely kind of like romantic movie about love in a time of racial anxiety, and having to love in a time of racialized anxiety, where racialized anxiety determines who and how you're supposed to express your affection. And so what was interesting about the movie, a lot of things were interesting about the movie. What was interesting about the movie is the protagonist was portrayed as someone who's low on the pole, but that didn't really matter to the boss or the protagonist. But that's really only because the protagonist is black. And the boss was not like a white girl who was tied into some sort of white girlhood who thought like her husband should make more money than she does or be a bigger boss than she, like it was all just very cool. Like everyone involved, like he was cool and she was cool and they were cool together in a way that's not easily depicted, but it was actually beautifully depicted. And we should support the movie even if you take the race out of like the racial politics, the explicit racial politics out of that, and just support it because it depicted actually two cool people meeting and falling in love with each other, not one falling into the other's kind of ridiculousness and having to cater to the other. And when they made mistakes with each other and how to like address each other in social situations, they would like talk about it in fruitful ways. There's a really nice conversation in a cab that after the girl makes kind of a faux pas and being a bad ally, that's really kind of lovely. And they just kind of think about it and talk about it. And it's really just two good people trying to figure out how to navigate both the professional and personal lives with each other. And, you know, even the white guy is depicted as just a regular kind of basic tech white guy where it's just like, I work hard, I get good things, and I get good things because I work hard. For him, how would he know anything different? If everyone around him is distorting his view of reality by managing his anxiety, how is he supposed to know that he is not rightfully entitled to, you know, all the things he gets? Right? So it's actually, there's a nice conversation where they're playing video games and the black guy and the white guy are talking, and it's kind of a heavy conversation, but it's juxtaposed with this kind of ridiculous virtual reality video game to take the edge off the conversation. But there's a lot that's going on in the movie that works out, needs to be seen and needs to be explored. And then there's that group of magical Negroes who get their power from managing the whites, and everybody has to stay on code, or everybody in the society loses their power, which I think is, you know, a pretty good stand-in for the NAACP, the Urban League, and all those black people and the what's the cat's name down in South Carolina, the Clyburn set. Used to be the John Lewis set before John Lewis passed. The Clyburn set, whose job is to be magical Negroes who manage the whites' anxiety in the Democratic Party for the survival of the blacks, but also their own personal enrichment and power, right? And there's a nice juxtaposition between what we do for survival and what we do for actual freedom, and they're not the same thing. And this is all played out, I think, fairly and clearly in the movie. I think this is a movie that most people should see. I think you should see this movie, and there's a reason why I'm doing this review. It's because I actually support you seeing this movie for a few reasons. Now, the reviews say that like it's a promising premise, but then it devolves into a romantic comedy that it shouldn't. And I say it's a promising premise that includes romance, and the romance is actually handled very well. The romance is actually handled very well because the girl Lizzie is so well cast and just thoughtful. She's it's surprisingly hard not to depict women on like of a certain age who look a certain way with a certain professional ambition as being either like vapid or obnoxious. Or obnoxiously, like, but she was not depicted as that either of them. She was actually just a good, thoughtful, competent person who was wrestling with the appropriate issues. And I would have liked a backstory on her because, you know, having been earlier that age, those women who are, you know, in their late 20s, who are obviously attractive and obviously smart, but actually thoughtful too. They've had so many options and have made, if they're still single, they've had so many options and have made decisions about why they don't want to be Chad's wife that they're actually pretty like decent people. They exist, especially in California, which is good that this movie took place in Los Angeles and not someplace else, because they exist in decent numbers. But I would have appreciated more of her backstory about like maybe some of her exes, because yeah. If you're pretty and you're 27 and you're that thoughtful and you kind of have that much of your life together, you've had a lot of options in your life, and you've had to make decisions on why not to take the easy way out. Not the easy way out, but the way out with like some rich tech douchebag. You've made a decision not to do that. And I know enough of those women exist. So like this was a nice story depicted. And if we can depict the black bougie son of doctors in American fiction, we can depict this other sort of last Negro in San Francisco type of black, and kind of work through what's going on with him. So I appreciate the movie. I don't know. I think it didn't do well because people don't want to see young black men being happy. And it didn't really fit the narrative of any interest. Maybe if he was gay, it would have been more popular. But I don't know. It was a good movie. You should see it. I think white people should see it. I think black people should see it. I especially think, I think white people and black people should see it for different reasons. But I think it was well done, and that's all I'm going to say about the movie. Peace.